The hospital room fell silent as Zora Jackson clutched her stomach in pain, sweat beading on her forehead while the monitors beeped rapidly around her. Her husband of 5 years, Richard Wilson, stood in the doorway with a cold stare that chilled her to the bone. As another contraction hit, making her cry out, Richard checked his watch impatiently. "I can't do this anymore," he said flatly, as if commenting on the weather. "This pregnancy has been nothing but trouble for 9 months. The doctors say you might not make it, and the baby's chances are slim. I've made my decision." Zora's eyes widened in disbelief as Richard pulled out divorce papers from his expensive suit jacket and placed them on the hospital table next to her bed. Through her pain, she couldn't comprehend what was happening. "You're leaving me? No. While I'm in labor with our child." Zora gasped, another contraction making her grip the bed rails. "This isn't working for me anymore. You've been sick this whole pregnancy. My business needs me. My new partner needs me." The way he said partner made it clear he wasn't talking about business. "You're leaving me for another woman while I'm giving birth to your child?" Zora couldn't believe what she was hearing. Richard shrugged. "She's not complicated like you. She won't hold me back. Sign these papers and I'll make sure the hospital bills are covered." "That's more than generous." The doctor rushed in, alarmed by Zora's vitals on the monitor. "Sir, we need to prep her for emergency surgery now. You need to leave." As the medical team pushed past Richard, he simply adjusted his tie and placed his fountain pen next to the papers. "I'll have my lawyer collect these tomorrow. Goodbye, Zora." And just like that, as Zora was wheeled into the operating room fighting for her life and their babies, Richard Wilson, billionaire tech mogul and her husband of 5 years, walked out without looking back. The surgery lasted hours. Zora drifted in and out of consciousness, the doctor's worried voices fading in and out. At one point she heard someone say, "We're losing her," and she felt herself slipping away. But then, like a tiny flame in darkness, she heard it, the cry of a baby. Her baby. And something inside her refused to give up. 3 days later, Zora woke up in the recovery room. Her body felt broken, but she was alive. A kind nurse named Jenny was checking her vitals. "My baby?" Zora whispered, her throat dry and voice weak. Jenny smiled. "Your daughter is a fighter just like her mama. She's tiny but doing well in the NICU." Tears filled Zora's eyes. "And my husband?" Jenny's smile faded. She handed Zora a large envelope. "This was delivered this morning. I'm so sorry." Inside were the signed divorce papers already filed with the court, and a check for exactly half of what the hospital bill would be. No note. No explanation. Just Richard's signature and a clear message. Zora and her daughter were on their own. As she held the papers in her trembling hands, something changed inside Zora. The pain of betrayal burned away, leaving behind something harder and stronger. Richard thought he had left behind a broken woman. But as Zora looked out the hospital window at the city skyline, she made a silent promise to herself and her daughter. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. By the time Zora was discharged a week later, she had already made 3 important calls. One to her old college roommate who had become a successful lawyer, one to the bank to secure what little savings she had left in her own name, and one to her former boss at the tech company where she'd worked before marrying Richard. "I need a place to stay and a job," she told her old boss, swallowing her pride. "And I promise you won't regret helping me." He remembered how brilliant she had been before Richard convinced her to quit and become a corporate wife. "You start Monday. My sister has a spare room you can use until you get on your feet." Zora named her daughter Victoria, which meant victory. It was both a promise and a battle cry. Little did Richard know that the woman he left behind in that hospital bed would one day make him regret ever walking out that door. 6 months after Victoria's birth, Zora's life bore no resemblance to her previous existence as Richard Wilson's wife. Gone were the luxury penthouses, designer clothes, and exclusive events. Now, she lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, working long hours at her old tech company while a kind elderly neighbor watched Victoria. Each morning, Zora woke at 5 a.m. to feed Victoria before preparing for work. She'd spend her lunch breaks video calling to check on her daughter, and evenings were dedicated to Victoria's care while Zora worked on her laptop late into the night. Weekends weren't for rest. They were for taking online courses in business and finance. The divorce settlement had been brutal. Richard's expensive lawyers had made sure Zora walked away with almost nothing, arguing that she had brought no assets into the marriage and that Richard's fortune had been built before they met. What they conveniently forgot was how Zora had helped Richard refine his initial business concept, how she'd edited his first business plan, how she'd networked alongside him to secure those crucial early investors. One evening, as Zora rocked Victoria to sleep, her phone buzzed with a news alert. She nearly dropped it when she saw the headline: Tech billionaire Richard Wilson announces engagement to model Jessica Lange. Attached was a photo of Richard and a tall blonde woman showing off an enormous diamond ring at a charity gala. The same gala where Richard had proposed to Zora 6 years earlier. For a moment, the pain threatened to overwhelm her. Then Victoria cooed softly in her sleep, and Zora's resolve hardened once more. The next day at work, Zora knocked on her boss's door. "Remember that idea I mentioned about improving the company's data security protocol? I've completed the proposal." She placed a thick folder on his desk. Her boss raised his eyebrows. "You did this while working full-time and caring for a baby?" Zora nodded. "I don't need much sleep these days." He flipped through the pages, his expression changing from curiosity to amazement. "This is revolutionary, Zora. If this works the way you've outlined, we could market this as a separate product entirely." "That's exactly what I was thinking," Zora said, her voice steady. "And I want to lead the project." 2 weeks later, Zora was heading a small team developing what would eventually become Secure Shield, a cybersecurity product that would change the industry. She worked harder than anyone, fueled by determination and the knowledge that every success brought her one step closer to the day she would face Richard as an equal. The project hit obstacles, funding issues, technical challenges, team conflicts, but Zora navigated them all with a cool head and strategic thinking. What her team didn't know was that she practiced those difficult conversations at home, speaking to her mirror while Victoria played on a blanket nearby. "She talks to herself," Zora overheard one colleague say to another. "Probably the stress getting to her." Zora didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. Results would speak louder than office gossip. Almost a year after starting the project, Zora presented Secure Shield to the company's board of directors. The room fell silent when she finished her presentation. "This is beyond what we expected," the CEO finally said. "We need to fast-track this to market." Secure Shield launched 6 months later and became an instant success in the corporate world. Companies scrambled to implement the security system, and Zora's name began appearing in tech publications. She kept a low profile in the media, turning down interview requests and keeping her connection to Richard Wilson private. The time wasn't right yet. On Victoria's second birthday, Zora received her first major bonus check as Secure Shield sales exceeded all projections. She took Victoria to the park and watched her toddle around the playground, laughing and free. "We're going to be okay, Vic," Zora whispered. "Better than okay." That night, after Victoria was asleep, Zora opened her laptop and created a new document. At the top, she typed, "Ascend Tech, Business Plan." Below it, she began outlining her vision for her own company, one that would one day compete directly with Richard's empire. It would take time. It would take sacrifice. But Zora Jackson was playing the long game now, and she was just getting started. 3 years passed in a blur of work, growth, and quiet determination. Victoria was now 5, a bright, curious child who had inherited her mother's quick mind and resilience. Zora had moved them to a comfortable townhouse and could afford a part-time nanny who helped when Zora needed to travel for business. Secure Shield had become the industry standard for data protection, and Zora had been promoted twice. The savings from her salary and bonuses were substantial, but not nearly enough for what she planned next. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Late one night, as Zora reviewed market analyses, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Zora Jackson?" asked a woman's voice. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Eleanor Chen. I run Phoenix Ventures. We invest in promising tech startups, particularly those led by women and minorities." She paused. "Your name keeps coming up in my research. I'd like to meet." 2 days later, Zora sat across from Eleanor in a quiet cafe. Eleanor was direct and no-nonsense, asking pointed questions about Zora's vision and experience. "I've been watching Secure Shield's success," Eleanor said, "but I suspect that's not your endgame." Zora hesitated, then decided on honesty. "No, it's not. I want to build something of my own." Eleanor nodded. "I thought so. Tell me about it." Zora outlined her idea for Ascend Tech, a company focused on integrated smart technology that would make digital security and accessibility seamless for both businesses and ordinary people. It was ambitious, innovative, and if successful would make Richard's company look outdated. When she finished, Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "You're Richard Wilson's ex-wife, aren't you?" Zora stiffened. "How did you?" "I do my homework," Eleanor said simply. Is this about revenge? It started that way, Zora admitted. But it's evolved. This technology could help millions of people. And yes, proving him wrong is still part of it. Eleanor smiled slightly. At least you're honest. Here's what I'm offering. Seed funding of $2 million in exchange for 15% equity, plus my connections to other investors when you're ready to scale. Zora had expected to hear an offer of perhaps $500,000. She kept her expression neutral despite her racing heart. Why so generous? Because I lost everything once too, Eleanor said quietly. And because your idea is brilliant. But mostly because I want to be there when you succeed. 2 months later, Ascend Tech officially launched in a small office space with a team of 5 talented engineers Zora had carefully recruited. She kept her day job at first, working evenings and weekends until Ascend secured its first client, a mid-sized healthcare company looking for better security solutions. The first year was brutal. Zora barely slept, torn between her commitment to Secure Shield, building Ascend from the ground up, and being present for Victoria. There were nights she cried from exhaustion after Victoria was asleep, questioning if she could truly pull this off. But slowly, Ascend began to gain traction. Their integrated security approach caught the attention of several major companies, and by the 18-month mark, Zora was able to leave her job and focus solely on Ascend. The breakthrough came when Ascend developed Secure Connect, an encryption system that protected data while allowing unprecedented ease of access for authorized users across multiple platforms. When they unveiled it at a major tech conference, the industry took notice. This changes everything, tech blogger Marcus Reed wrote after the demonstration. Ascend Tech, led by the enigmatic Zora Jackson, just made every other security system look like a rusty padlock. Orders began pouring in and Ascend grew rapidly. Zora hired carefully, building a diverse team united by talent and drive. She made sure the company culture valued work-life balance, remembering her own struggles as a working mother. Victoria thrived as well, proud of her mother's growing success. Mommy builds invisible shields, she told her kindergarten class during career day. By the time Victoria turned 7, Ascend Tech had offices in 3 cities and was valued at $50 million. Zora had become a respected figure in the tech world, though she still avoided publicity when possible. The time wasn't right yet for Richard to realize who was behind Ascend's meteoric rise. That changed when Forbes magazine requested an interview for their Innovators to Watch issue. Eleanor advised her to accept. You've earned this recognition, she said, and it's time to step out of the shadows. The article featured a professional photo of Zora, looking confident and powerful in a simple black suit, alongside a detailed profile of her journey from a tech company employee to the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing security firms in the country. The article made no mention of Richard Wilson, but Zora knew he would recognize her immediately. The morning after the magazine hit newsstands, Zora received a text from an unfamiliar number. We should talk. RW. Zora smiled as she deleted the message without responding. She wasn't ready to face him yet. There was still more to accomplish before that day would come. And when it did, she would be meeting him not as his discarded wife, but as his most formidable competitor. At 35, Zora Jackson had transformed from a woman abandoned in a hospital bed to a force in the tech industry. Ascend Tech had grown exponentially, with offices now spanning across 5 countries and a valuation approaching $500 million. Business magazines regularly featured her innovations, and investment firms competed for the chance to fund her next projects. Victoria, now 9, was growing into a thoughtful, intelligent girl who understood far more than most children her age. One evening, as they sat on their apartment balcony overlooking the city lights, Victoria asked the question Zora had been dreading. Mom, why don't I have a dad like other kids? Zora put down her tablet and pulled Victoria close. You do have a father, Vic. But he chose not to be part of our lives. Is he dead? Victoria asked bluntly. No, sweetie. He's alive. He just wasn't ready to be a father. Victoria considered this. Is he that man in the pictures Aunt Tanya has? The one she hides when you come over? Zora made a mental note to talk to her friend about being more discreet. Yes. His name is Richard Wilson. He and I were married, but we separated when you were born. Because he didn't want me? Victoria's voice was small. No, Zora said firmly. Because he wasn't strong enough to handle the amazing gift that you are. That was his loss and my gain. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Victoria leaned against her mother. Will I ever meet him? Someday perhaps, Zora answered carefully. If that's what you want when you're older. That night, after Victoria was asleep, Zora received a call from Eleanor. Wilson Technologies just announced a new security system, Eleanor said without preamble. They're calling it Fortress Guard. It's clearly an attempt to compete with Secure Connect. Zora wasn't surprised. Richard had been trying to replicate Ascend's success for the past 2 years. How does it look? Like a poor imitation, Eleanor replied. But that's not why I'm calling. There's a rumor that Wilson Technologies is preparing for an aggressive expansion. They're targeting some of our potential clients directly. Let them try, Zora said calmly. We have better technology and better ethics. You can't buy that. But privately, Zora knew Richard was a formidable opponent. He had more resources, more industry connections, and a ruthlessness she couldn't match. What she had was innovation and a team that believed in Ascend's mission. The next morning, Zora called an emergency meeting with her executive team. Wilson Technologies is coming after us, she announced. We need to accelerate our plans for Nexus. Nexus was Ascend's most ambitious project yet, an integrated system that would bridge the gap between corporate security and personal data protection. If successful, it would make Ascend's technology essential for any company serious about comprehensive security. That's at least a year away from beta testing, her CTO objected. Then we work faster, Zora replied. I'll bring in additional engineers and double the R&D budget. Nexus is our future. For the next 6 months, Ascend operated in high gear. Zora often worked through the night, stopping only to have breakfast with Victoria before she went to school. The pressure was intense, but Zora thrived on it, knowing that each step forward was a step toward securing her daughter's future. And yes, toward showing Richard what he had walked away from. The corporate battle intensified. Wilson Technologies undercut Ascend's prices and launched an aggressive marketing campaign questioning the reliability of newer security firms. Ascend lost several potential clients, and for the first time their growth slowed. Then came the personal attack. A business blog published an article questioning Zora's qualifications, suggesting her success was due to connections rather than innovation. Though Richard wasn't quoted directly, Zora recognized his influence in the carefully worded criticism. Instead of firing back, Zora called a press conference and announced Ascend would be offering free security assessments to nonprofit organizations working in education and healthcare. We believe everyone deserves protection, not just those who can afford premium prices, she stated, looking directly at the cameras. The move generated positive publicity and highlighted the difference between Ascend's values and Wilson Technologies' profit-driven approach. New clients began reaching out, attracted by Ascend's ethos as much as its technology. But the real game-changer came when Nexus was finally ready for its first demonstration. Zora arranged for a dramatic unveiling at the International Technology Summit, where she knew Richard would be present. On the day of the presentation, Victoria insisted on attending. I want to see you show everyone how amazing you are, she said proudly. Zora hesitated but agreed. It was time Victoria understood the legacy she was building for her. The auditorium was packed when Zora took the stage. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Richard in the front row, his expression unreadable. She began her presentation without acknowledging him. Today's digital landscape is fragmented, she began. Companies protect their data but leave their customers vulnerable. Individuals try to secure their personal information but can't control how businesses use it. Nexus bridges that divide. The demonstration that followed left the audience stunned. Nexus didn't just protect data. It created an ecosystem where security was seamless yet unbreakable, where personal privacy was respected while allowing for necessary business functions. When Zora finished, the applause was thunderous. Technology reporters rushed forward with questions, and potential clients lined up to speak with Ascend representatives. In the chaos, Zora lost sight of Richard, until she felt a tug on her sleeve. Victoria pointed across the room. Mom, that man is staring at us. Richard stood 20 feet away, his gaze fixed on Victoria. For a moment, recognition flickered in his eyes as he looked at the daughter he had never met. Zora placed a protective hand on Victoria's shoulder and met Richard's stare unflinchingly. He was the first to look away, turning abruptly to leave the auditorium. Who was that? Victoria asked. Someone who made a very big mistake, Zora replied quietly. And I think he just realized it. That night, the first acquisition offer from Wilson Technologies arrived in Zora's email. She deleted it without opening it. She hadn't built Ascend just to sell it to Richard at the first opportunity. This was only the beginning of their real battle. The success of Nexus catapulted Ascend Tech into the billion-dollar club. With a valuation now exceeding $1.2 billion, Zora had officially achieved what many called impossible: building a tech empire from scratch while raising a child alone. Business schools used her story as a case study in innovation and resilience. Financial magazines featured her on their covers. But with greater success came greater scrutiny. Reporters began digging into Zora's past, and eventually the connection to Richard Wilson became public knowledge. Tech rivals share marital history, blared one headline. Abandoned wife becomes billionaire's competition, proclaimed another. Zora maintained her dignity, refusing to comment on her personal history with Richard. Ascend Tech stands on its own merits, was her only statement. Our focus remains on creating technology that protects and empowers our clients. Victoria, now 11, found out about the headlines from classmates at her private school. She came home upset one day, her eyes red from crying. Everyone's talking about how my father left us, she said as Zora held her. Tyler Maxwell said Dad didn't want me because something was wrong with me. Zora's heart broke for her daughter. Nothing is wrong with you, Victoria. You are perfect exactly as you are. Your father made choices based on his own weaknesses, not because of anything to do with you. Then why doesn't he ever try to see me? Victoria asked. Now that he knows who I am? Zora had no good answer for that. Richard had made no attempt to contact Victoria, though he had sent 2 more acquisition offers to Ascend, each higher than the last. The media frenzy eventually died down, but the damage was done. Victoria became more withdrawn, spending hours researching her father online and asking questions Zora struggled to answer without bitterness. Then came the anonymous email. You're not the only one he abandoned. We should talk. Zora almost deleted it as spam, but something made her hesitate. After running it through Ascend's security protocols to ensure it contained no malware, she replied with a secure communication channel. 3 days later, she sat in a quiet cafe, waiting for the mysterious AM. When a tall, elegant black woman approached her table, Zora immediately noticed the resemblance. This woman had Richard's eyes. I'm Angela Morris, the woman said, extending her hand. Richard Wilson's sister. Zora nearly spilled her coffee. Richard never mentioned having a sister. Angela smiled sadly. He wouldn't. I was officially erased from the family when I chose to live with our mother after the divorce. She sat down across from Zora. Richard took our father's side, and his money and connections. Over the next hour, Angela revealed a side of Richard that Zora had never known. How he had systematically cut ties with family members who didn't serve his ambitions. How he had used his father's connections to build his first company while claiming to be self-made. How his pattern with women, charm, use, discard, had been established long before he met Zora. Why are you telling me this now? Zora asked finally. Because he's trying to destroy you, Angela said simply. And because that little girl of yours deserves to know the truth about her father. All of it. Angela explained that Richard had recently called her, seeking information about Zora that he could use against her. He thinks I'm still bitter enough about being cut off that I'd help him. He doesn't know I've been following your career for years. You're building something meaningful, Zora. Don't let him take that from you. Before they parted, Angela handed Zora a flash drive. This contains family records, private emails, business documents Richard doesn't know I have. Use it if you need to, but be careful. Richard is dangerous when cornered. That night, Zora reviewed the files while Victoria slept. What she found made her blood run cold. Richard hadn't just abandoned her, he had systematically undermined her throughout their marriage, taking credit for her ideas, gaslighting her when she questioned his decisions, and planning his exit long before Victoria's difficult birth gave him the perfect excuse. Most disturbing were emails between Richard and his current wife, Jessica, dating back to when Zora was just 4 months pregnant. They had been planning their life together while Zora was picking out nursery colors. Zora closed her laptop, feeling sick. 4 years she had channeled her pain into building Ascend, believing that success would be the best revenge. But now she realized Richard might never truly feel the consequences of his actions unless she forced him to face them. The next morning, Zora received word that Wilson Technologies was launching a smear campaign, subtly questioning Ascend's data security practices. Several nervous clients had already called, seeking reassurance. Zora called an emergency board meeting. Richard Wilson is playing dirty, she told them. We have 2 choices, play defense or go on the offensive. What are you proposing? Eleanor asked carefully. A merger offer, Zora said, surprising everyone. We approach Wilson Technologies about joining forces. You want to work with that man after what he did to you? her CFO asked incredulously. No, Zora said with a cold smile. I want him to think that's what I want. When he lets his guard down, we'll have access to what we really need, proof that Fortress Guard is actually stealing user data and selling it to third parties. The room fell silent. Finally, Eleanor spoke up. You have evidence of this? Zora nodded toward her laptop. Enough to be suspicious. But we need concrete proof from inside Wilson Technologies. This merger exploration would give us legal access to their systems. The plan was risky, ethically complicated, and potentially brilliant. After hours of discussion, the board reluctantly agreed to proceed, with strict legal oversight. The next day, Zora sent Richard a carefully worded email suggesting that their personal history shouldn't stand in the way of good business. She proposed preliminary talks about ways their companies might work together for the good of the industry. Richard's response came within hours. Dinner. Tomorrow. My office. 8 p.m. As Zora prepared for the meeting that could change everything, Victoria watched her from the doorway of her bedroom. You're going to see him, aren't you? She asked. My father. Zora nodded. For business reasons. Would you like me to give him a message from you? Victoria thought for a long moment, then shook her head. No. He doesn't deserve to hear from me yet. Yet. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. When Zora arrived at the Wilson Technologies headquarters the next evening, she was prepared for anything, except the sight of Victoria sitting in Richard's office. What is she doing here? Zora demanded, her heart racing. Richard smiled coldly. Getting to know her father, of course. Isn't that right, Victoria? Victoria looked up with tear-stained eyes. He sent a car for me after school, Mom. He said you knew. In that moment, Zora realized Richard's game was far more personal and dangerous than she had imagined. Get your things, Victoria. We're leaving. Zora's voice was steel wrapped in ice as she extended her hand to her daughter. Richard stepped between them. Actually, I think Victoria might want to hear what I have to offer. A father's presence in her life. The Wilson name. Opportunities you could never provide. You gave up those rights when you walked out of that hospital room 11 years ago, Zora said, keeping her voice steady despite the fury building inside her. Victoria, come here now. Victoria stood slowly, looking between the two adults. You really left Mom when she was having me? She asked Richard. Richard's confident smile faltered. It was a complicated situation, Victoria. Your mother was very difficult during that time. Difficult? Zora nearly laughed. I was fighting for my life and our daughter's life while you were planning your escape with your mistress. Victoria moved to her mother's side, taking her hand firmly. I want to go home, Mom. As they turned to leave, Richard called after them. This meeting was about a potential merger, Zora. Walking out now could be seen as negotiating in bad faith. Your shareholders won't be pleased. Zora paused at the door. Using my daughter to manipulate me isn't negotiating in good faith either, Richard. If you want to discuss business, you can speak to my lawyers tomorrow. And if you ever come near Victoria again without my explicit permission, I will bury you. In the car ride home, Victoria was unusually quiet. Finally, she said, he showed me pictures of his other kids. My half-brothers. Zora gripped the steering wheel tighter. Richard had 2 sons with Jessica, a fact she had carefully avoided discussing with Victoria. He said I could come stay with them sometimes. Be part of their family. Victoria's voice was small. Is that true? That would be up to the courts, Victoria. And up to you when you're older. Zora struggled to remain neutral. What do you think about that? Victoria looked out the window at the passing city lights. He doesn't really want me. He just wants to hurt you. The insight, so adult and so painfully accurate, broke Zora's heart. I'm so sorry he put you through this. It's okay, Mom. I told him I already have a family. Victoria reached over and squeezed Zora's hand. He seemed surprised by that. When they arrived home, Zora called her lawyer and explained Richard's ambush. Get a restraining order first thing tomorrow, she instructed. And contact the school. Victoria is not to leave with anyone but me or her regular nanny, under any circumstances. That night, Zora couldn't sleep. The confrontation with Richard had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. He was still the same manipulative, calculating man she had married. Only now his targets included Victoria. The next morning brought a flurry of legal activity. Richard's lawyers claimed the meeting had been a misunderstanding, that Victoria had expressed interest in meeting her father and Richard had merely accommodated her wish. It was a blatant lie but difficult to disprove. Meanwhile, the business press got wind of the potential merger talks. Ascend's stock price rose on speculation, while Wilson Technologies investors expressed concern about what such a merger might mean for their company's autonomy. Zora called another emergency board meeting. The merger plan was a mistake, she admitted. I let personal history cloud my judgment. We need a new strategy. Richard crossed a line using your daughter, Eleanor said. That gives us something to work with. They developed a two-pronged approach. Legally, they would pursue harassment charges based on Richard's unauthorized contact with Victoria, and professionally, they would accelerate the launch of Ascend's newest innovation, a consumer privacy product that would directly challenge Wilson Technologies' most profitable division. Over the next week, Zora worked relentlessly, splitting her time between preparing for the product launch and ensuring Victoria was safe and supported. She hired additional security for their home and arranged for a counselor to help Victoria process the encounter with her father. Then, 3 days before the scheduled product launch, disaster struck. An anonymous source leaked supposed security flaws in Ascend's core products to a tech blog. The article included screenshots of internal documents that appeared to show Ascend cutting corners on user privacy. The documents were sophisticated forgeries, but the damage was immediate. Ascend stock dropped 15% in a single day. Major clients began calling, demanding reassurances. Zora knew instantly who was behind it. He's trying to destroy what we've built, she told her executive team. And he nearly succeeded with those forgeries. But how do we prove they're fake? Her CTO asked. These look incredibly convincing. Zora thought of Angela's flash drive, still locked in her home safe. I think it's time to fight fire with fire. But first, we need to shore up confidence in our products. She organized a live demonstration of Ascend's security protocols, inviting independent auditors to test them in real time. The event was streamed online, allowing clients and investors to watch as Ascend systems withstood increasingly sophisticated attacks. As confidence began to rebuild, Zora reached out to Angela. I need your help, she explained. Richard is trying to destroy my company with false accusations. I need to know if there's anything in those files that could help us. Angela was silent for a moment. There's evidence that Richard has been engaging in corporate espionage for years. He didn't just copy your ideas, he's stolen intellectual property from multiple companies. Can it be proven? Zora asked. Yes, Angela replied. But using it means war. Are you ready for that? Zora thought of Victoria's tear-stained face in Richard's office, of the years of struggle, of everything she had built that was now under threat. I've been ready for 11 years, she said. The next day, Zora's lawyers filed a countersuit against Wilson Technologies, alleging corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, and defamation. Attached was a carefully curated selection of documents from Angela's files, enough to establish a pattern of unethical behavior, but holding back the most damaging evidence as leverage. The business world exploded with the news. Wilson Technologies stock plummeted as investors worried about potential legal consequences. Richard called a hasty press conference to deny all allegations, but his usual confidence was noticeably absent. That evening, as Zora helped Victoria with her science project, her phone rang. It was Richard. What do you want? She asked coldly. Call off your dogs, Zora, Richard said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You have no idea what you're starting. I didn't start this, Richard. You did, when you decided to drag our daughter into your games. I want to meet. Just us. No lawyers, no teams. Tonight. Zora considered for a moment. The Riverview Hotel. Public lobby. 1 hour. After arranging for her security team to be nearby and making sure Victoria was safely with her nanny, Zora arrived at the hotel precisely on time. Richard was already waiting, looking less polished than usual, the strain evident on his face. You've become quite the businesswoman, he said as she sat down across from him. I underestimated you. You've been underestimating me since the day we met, Zora replied calmly. What do you want, Richard? A truce. Drop the lawsuit, I'll retract the leaked documents. We both back off. Zora studied him carefully. And Victoria? Richard looked away. I won't contact her again without going through proper channels. Not good enough, Zora said. I want your word that you'll stay away from her completely unless she explicitly asks to see you when she's older. She's my daughter too, Richard protested weakly. Biology doesn't make you a parent, Richard. Showing up does. And you've had 11 years to show up. Richard's jaw tightened. Fine. But I want something in return beyond dropping the lawsuit. I want access to Ascend's encryption protocols for Fortress Guard. Zora laughed. So that's what this is really about. You can't beat our technology, so you're trying to steal it. I'm offering a fair exchange, Richard insisted. No deal, Zora said, standing up. You'll leave Victoria alone and you'll retract those forged documents, or I release everything I have to the press. All of it, Richard. Including the emails between you and Jessica from when I was pregnant. Richard's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Try me, Zora said, turning to leave. You have until noon tomorrow. As she walked away, Richard called after her. I've always wondered, how did you do it? Build all this while raising her alone? Zora paused and looked back at him. I did it because you thought I couldn't. By morning, the forged documents had been publicly retracted. A statement from Wilson Technologies claimed they had been misled by falsified information from an unreliable source, and apologized for any confusion. The stock market responded immediately, with Ascend's shares rebounding and Wilson Technologies continuing to slide. Zora should have felt victorious, but instead she felt drained. The confrontation with Richard had reopened old wounds, reminding her of the magnitude of his betrayal and the years of struggle that followed. Are you okay, Mom? Victoria asked over breakfast, intuitive as always. Just tired, sweetheart, Zora assured her. Big day at work today. The truth was, Zora knew Richard wouldn't give up so easily. He had backed down temporarily, but the war was far from over. She needed to prepare for his next move. At Ascend headquarters, Zora gathered her most trusted team members. Richard Wilson is cornered, which makes him dangerous, she explained. We need to accelerate our expansion plans. 4 months, Ascend had been developing partnerships with international technology firms, preparing to take their products global. Now Zora pushed to finalize those deals immediately, starting with major markets in Europe and Asia where Wilson Technologies had less influence. She also initiated talks with government agencies looking for more secure data protection systems. These contracts were prestigious and lucrative, but more importantly, they would place Ascend in a position where attacking them would mean taking on government interests. Something even Richard would think twice about. Meanwhile, Victoria started seeing a therapist to help process her complicated feelings about her father. The therapist suggested that Victoria write letters to Richard that she didn't have to send, a way to express her thoughts without the pressure of actual communication. One evening, Zora found Victoria at the kitchen table, earnestly writing on fancy stationery. Is that homework? Zora asked. Victoria shook her head. It's a letter to him. I'm not going to send it. Would you like to tell me what it says? Zora asked carefully. Victoria hesitated, then pushed the paper toward her mother. Zora read. Dear Father, I used to dream about meeting you. I thought you would be a hero who had to go away for some important reason. Now I know you just didn't want me. I don't care anymore. Mom and I are fine without you. She built something amazing while you were gone. She never says bad things about you, but I know what you did. Maybe someday I'll want to know you, but right now I don't. Victoria. Tears filled Zora's eyes as she handed the letter back. That's very honest, Vic. Dr. Marshall says honesty helps healing, Victoria said with a maturity beyond her years. Do you think he ever regrets leaving us? Zora chose her words carefully. I don't know. Some people aren't capable of that kind of self-reflection. But his regret or lack of it doesn't define your worth, Victoria. You are extraordinary with or without his recognition. The following week brought a surprising development. Financial News reported that Jessica Wilson had filed for divorce from Richard, citing irreconcilable differences. Rumors swirled about financial disagreements and accusations of infidelity. Eleanor called Zora as soon as the news broke. This could change the game. Richard's personal chaos might distract him from his vendetta against Ascend. Or make him more desperate, Zora countered. We need to be prepared either way. Her caution proved wise. 3 days later, Wilson Technologies announced a massive price cut on all their security products, clearly aiming to undercut Ascend's market share. It was a move that would hurt Wilson's own profits, but could potentially damage Ascend even more. Instead of engaging in a price war, Zora took a different approach. She called a press conference and announced the Secure Future Initiative, a program that would provide Ascend's top-tier security products to educational institutions at drastically reduced costs. In today's digital world, schools are increasingly targeted by cyber attacks, she explained to the assembled press. We believe protecting our children's data and educational resources isn't just good business, it's our responsibility. The announcement generated overwhelmingly positive publicity. Educational organizations across the country began reaching out to Ascend, and corporate clients took notice of the company's commitment to social responsibility. Richard countered by announcing a similar program for hospitals, but the move was widely criticized as reactive and opportunistic rather than genuine. As the corporate battle escalated, Zora maintained a careful balance between her professional responsibilities and her commitment to Victoria. She still helped with homework, attended school events, and preserved their Sunday traditions of pancake breakfasts and afternoon hikes. During one such hike, Victoria asked, "Mom, are we rich now?" Zora considered the question. "By most standards, yes. Ascend is worth billions and we have more than we need. Does that bother you?" Victoria shook her head. "No. But I was thinking about all the kids who don't have what I have. Maybe we could help them." That conversation led to the creation of the Jackson Foundation, dedicated to supporting single parents pursuing education and entrepreneurship. Zora appointed Angela Morris as its director, recognizing her insight and commitment to breaking destructive family patterns. The foundation's first initiative provided childcare, housing subsidies, and mentorship to single mothers pursuing degrees in technology fields. The program quickly gained attention for its practical approach and measurable results. When a prominent business magazine requested an interview about the foundation, Zora agreed on the condition that Victoria could join her. The resulting article featured a photo of mother and daughter together, showcasing their bond and shared vision. The day the magazine hit newsstands, Zora received a text from Angela. "Richard saw the article. He's furious that Victoria is getting positive attention as your daughter, not his. Be careful." That warning proved prescient. The next day, Richard filed a lawsuit claiming parental alienation and demanding joint custody of Victoria. Despite their verbal agreement, he was using the courts to force his way back into their lives. When Zora showed the court documents to Victoria, the girl's response surprised her. "I want to speak to the judge," Victoria said firmly. "I want to tell them myself that he doesn't really want me." "That's a lot for someone your age to handle," Zora cautioned. "You were building a company at my age," Victoria pointed out. "I can handle a conversation." Zora smiled at her daughter's determination, so much like her own. "We'll talk to our lawyer about it." As they prepared for the custody battle, Ascend continued its expansion. New offices opened in London, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. The company's valuation climbed to $3.2 billion, putting Zora's personal net worth at nearly $1.5 billion, officially surpassing Richard's wealth for the first time. Financial publications noted the milestone. Tech innovation trumps inheritance. Jackson overtakes ex-husband in wealth rankings. Richard's response came in the form of an unexpected visit to Ascend's headquarters. He walked into the lobby unannounced, demanding to see Zora. Security alerted her immediately. "Send him to the main conference room," she instructed. "And stay close." When Zora entered the room, Richard was standing at the window looking out at the city skyline. "Impressive view," he commented without turning around. "What do you want, Richard?" Zora asked, remaining near the door. He turned to face her. "A genuine partnership. Ascend and Wilson Technologies together would dominate the global market. No one could touch us." Zora raised an eyebrow. "And the custody suit?" "A negotiating tactic," Richard admitted without shame. "Join forces with me professionally and I'll drop it." "Using our daughter as leverage again," Zora noted coldly. "Some things never change." "Business is business," Richard shrugged. "And you're a businesswoman now. Think about it rationally, together we'd be unstoppable." Zora studied him for a moment. The years had added silver to his temples but hadn't changed his core. He still saw people as pieces to be moved on a chessboard, relationships as transactions. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "Send me a formal proposal and I'll review it with my board." Richard smiled, clearly believing he had won. "You won't regret this, Zora. It's the smart move." After he left, Eleanor found Zora in her office, staring at old photos on her desk. Pictures from before Victoria, when she and Richard had seemed happy. "You're not actually considering his offer, are you?" Eleanor asked incredulously. "Of course not," Zora replied. "But I need time to make my own move. Richard always underestimates his opponents. It's his greatest weakness." "What are you planning?" Eleanor asked. Zora's expression was resolute. "Something he'll never see coming." For 2 weeks, Zora appeared to be seriously considering Richard's merger proposal. She met with his executives, reviewed financial projections, and participated in strategy sessions discussing how the combined companies would function. Throughout the process, she was professional and engaged, giving Richard no reason to doubt her sincerity. Meanwhile, she was executing a plan that had been years in the making. Since founding Ascend, Zora had maintained a separate research division working on a revolutionary project codenamed Phoenix. Only a handful of people knew its true nature: a complete reinvention of digital security that would render all existing systems, including Ascend's own products, obsolete. While Richard thought he was negotiating a merger, Zora was preparing to transform the entire industry. The custody hearing was scheduled for Friday. On Wednesday evening, Zora sat Victoria down for an important conversation. "I need to tell you something about the business situation with your father," she began carefully. "It's complicated and it affects you too." Victoria nodded seriously. "I can handle it, Mom. Richard wants our companies to merge, to become one big company. He's using the custody case to pressure me into agreeing." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "So he doesn't really want to see me? He just wants your company?" "I think he wants both in his way," Zora said honestly. "He wants to control everything that was once his, including you." "What are you going to do?" Victoria asked. "I'm going to end this once and for all," Zora replied. "But I need to know you're okay with my plan. It will mean revealing some difficult truths about Richard publicly." Victoria thought for a moment. "Will it hurt his other kids? My half-brothers?" The question touched Zora deeply, that her daughter would consider the feelings of children she had never met. "I've been careful to protect them," Zora assured her. "The focus will be on Richard's business practices, not his family." Victoria nodded. "Then do what you need to do. I'm tired of him hanging over our lives." Thursday morning, Zora called an all-hands meeting at Ascend. The atmosphere was tense as employees speculated about the rumored merger. "There will be no merger with Wilson Technologies," Zora announced to audible sighs of relief. "Instead, today we unveil Project Phoenix." On screens throughout the building, technical specifications appeared for a security system unlike anything the industry had seen before. Based on quantum encryption principles, Phoenix offered virtually unbreakable security with unprecedented ease of use. "We begin rolling this out to existing clients next week," Zora continued. "All Ascend products will be upgraded at no additional cost. And today we file patents on the core technology." The room erupted in applause and questions. As the technical team began explaining the details, Zora slipped away to her office where Eleanor was waiting. "The board approved the press release," Eleanor confirmed. "It goes live in 1 hour." The release was carefully worded but devastating in its implications. It detailed how Wilson Technologies had systematically engaged in corporate espionage, including specific instances where they had attempted to steal Ascend's intellectual property. It revealed Richard's pattern of unethical business practices dating back to the beginning of his career. Most damaging was the inclusion of evidence showing that Fortress Guard, Wilson Technologies' flagship product, contained serious security vulnerabilities that the company had deliberately concealed from clients. "Once this goes public, Richard will have no choice but to respond," Zora said. "And that's when we present the option." The option was simple but brilliant. Wilson Technologies could agree to an independent security audit and implement necessary fixes under Ascend's guidance, or face a class action lawsuit from clients whose data had been compromised. "It's not a merger," Zora explained to Eleanor. "It's a controlled demolition of everything Richard built on lies, followed by a rescue operation that places Ascend in control." When the press release hit, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Wilson Technologies stock plummeted as clients demanded answers. Richard called an emergency board meeting, but the damage was spiraling beyond his control. By that evening, several major clients had already announced they were suspending use of Wilson Technologies products pending investigation. Government agencies that had contracted with the company began internal reviews of potential security breaches. Richard's lawyers contacted Zora demanding a retraction. Her response was a single document: the offer to help Wilson Technologies address the security flaws under terms that would essentially place the company under Ascend's supervision. As Friday dawned, the day of the scheduled custody hearing, Zora prepared Victoria for court. They had just finished breakfast when Zora's phone rang. It was Richard. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his voice raw with fury and something else, defeat. "No, Richard. You did that yourself," Zora replied calmly. "I'm simply exposing the truth." "What do you want?" he asked after a long pause. "Drop the custody case. Permanently. Sign legal documents acknowledging that you voluntarily surrender all parental rights to Victoria. Accept our offer to rescue what's left of Wilson Technologies." and make a public statement taking full responsibility for the security flaws. You're asking me to humiliate myself, Richard protested. I'm giving you a chance to salvage something from the wreckage, Zora corrected him. Which is more than you gave me 11 years ago. 2 hours later, instead of appearing in family court, Zora and Victoria watched from Ascend headquarters as Richard held a press conference. He looked haggard, his usual confidence replaced by resigned acceptance. Recent revelations regarding security vulnerabilities in Wilson Technologies products are accurate, he admitted. As CEO, I take full responsibility for these failures. We have engaged with Ascend Tech to address these issues under their guidance. He went on to announce a strategic restructuring that, while carefully worded, essentially conceded control of his company to Ascend's oversight. When the press conference ended, Victoria turned to her mother. Is it over? Almost, Zora said. There's one more thing we need to do. That afternoon, Richard came to Ascend's headquarters to sign the agreements that would formalize the arrangement between the companies. As part of the deal, he would step down as CEO of Wilson Technologies but remain as a figurehead chairman with no real power. When he arrived, Zora had him shown to her office. Victoria was waiting there with her. Richard paused in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. I didn't expect to see you, Victoria. I wanted to be here, Victoria said coolly. I wanted to see you sign the papers giving up your rights to me. Richard flinched at her directness. I know you don't understand now, but someday. I understand perfectly, Victoria interrupted. You left when it got hard. Mom stayed. That's all I need to know. Zora placed a gentle hand on Victoria's shoulder. The papers are on the desk, Richard. As Richard sat down to sign the documents relinquishing his parental rights, Zora noticed how old he suddenly looked. The man who had once seemed so powerful to her now appeared diminished, hollowed out by his own choices. When he finished signing, he stood awkwardly as if unsure how to leave. Victoria stepped forward unexpectedly. I wrote you a letter, she said, holding out an envelope. You can read it after you leave. Richard took it with a look of surprise. Thank you, he said softly. After he left, Zora turned to Victoria. What did the letter say? That I forgive him, Victoria replied. Not for him but for me. Dr. Marshall says holding on to anger only hurts yourself. Zora pulled her daughter into a tight hug, amazed at her wisdom and strength. When did you get so grown up? Victoria hugged her back fiercely. I had a good teacher. The business world buzzed with the dramatic restructuring that placed Ascend in control of Wilson Technologies' operations. Financial analysts called it the tech acquisition of the decade, though technically it wasn't an acquisition at all. Zora had engineered a solution that protected Wilson's clients and employees while ensuring the company's technology would be made secure under Ascend's guidance. Richard remained as chairman in name only, his role purely ceremonial. He made no further attempts to contact Victoria or interfere with Zora's business operations. The letter Victoria had given him seemed to have had an impact. Angela reported that he had been seen reading it multiple times, his expression uncharacteristically reflective. For Zora and Victoria, life settled into a new normal. With Project Phoenix successfully launched and the Wilson situation resolved, Zora finally felt she could take a step back from the constant pressure of running Ascend. She appointed a trusted COO to handle day-to-day operations and reduced her own schedule to focus more on the Jackson Foundation and, most importantly, on Victoria. As Victoria entered her teenage years, she blossomed into a thoughtful, socially conscious young woman with her mother's determination and intelligence. She showed a particular interest in the Foundation's work, often accompanying Zora to events and offering insights that surprised the adults around her. The summer after Victoria turned 13, Zora took her on a month-long trip around the world. They visited Ascend's international offices but spent most of their time exploring local cultures, volunteering with community organizations, and simply enjoying each other's company away from the pressures of work and school. In Tokyo, during a quiet moment at a traditional garden, Victoria asked, "Do you ever wish things had been different with him? That he had stayed?" Zora considered the question carefully. Sometimes I used to wonder what our lives might have been like if he'd been different than he was. But then I think about everything we've built together, you and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. I think everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. When they returned home, Zora launched a new initiative through the Jackson Foundation, a technology education program for girls from underserved communities. The program quickly gained national attention, with major tech companies offering internships for its graduates. One evening, as Zora reviewed applications for the program, Victoria sat down beside her with an unusually serious expression. "I want to contact them," she said. "My half-brothers. They're innocent in all this and they're still my family." The request caught Zora off guard. "Are you sure? They're quite a bit younger than you." Victoria nodded. "I've been thinking about it for a long time. They deserve to know they have a sister who cares about them, even if our father made bad choices." After careful consideration and consultation with their lawyer, Zora helped Victoria write a letter to Jessica Wilson, explaining Victoria's wish to meet her half-brothers. To their surprise, Jessica responded positively, explaining that she had always felt uncomfortable with Richard's rejection of his first child. The first meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a family restaurant with play areas for the younger boys, ages 5 and 7. Victoria was nervous but determined. "What if they don't like me?" she worried as they drove to the meeting. "Just be yourself," Zora assured her. "That's more than enough." Jessica turned out to be warm and welcoming, clearly making efforts to make Victoria feel comfortable. The boys were curious and excited about their big sister, showing her their toys and asking endless questions about her life. As the children played, Jessica and Zora sat together watching them. "I owe you an apology," Jessica said quietly. "I knew Richard was married when we got involved. I was young and naive, but that's no excuse." "We've all made mistakes," Zora replied, surprising herself with how little anger she felt now. "What matters is what we do afterward." Jessica nodded. "After I saw how he treated you and Victoria, I always wondered when my turn would come. When he'd decide I was too complicated too." She glanced at her sons. "I'm glad I left when I did." That meeting turned into regular visits, with Victoria developing a genuine bond with her half-brothers. Richard remained distant from all of them, increasingly isolated as his influence in the business world continued to wane. 2 years later, as Victoria prepared to enter high school, Zora decided it was time for another change. Despite Ascend's continued success and the effective absorption of Wilson Technologies, she felt ready for new challenges. "I'm stepping down as CEO," she announced to the board. "I'll remain as chairwoman, but it's time for fresh leadership to take Ascend into its next phase." The news shocked the business world but made perfect sense to those who knew Zora well. She had built Ascend partly out of necessity, partly out of determination to prove Richard wrong. Now, with those goals accomplished, she wanted to focus on work that fed her soul, expanding the foundation's reach, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and most importantly, being present for Victoria's teenage years. On her last day as CEO, Zora cleared her office while Victoria helped box up personal items. "What will you do now?" Victoria asked, carefully wrapping a framed photo of the two of them from their world tour. "Whatever we want," Zora smiled. "We've earned that freedom." As if on cue, Zora's phone rang with a news alert. Richard Wilson had announced his complete retirement from business, selling his remaining stake in what had once been Wilson Technologies. The brief statement cited health concerns and a desire to reconnect with what truly matters in life. Victoria read the alert over her mother's shoulder. "Do you think he finally gets it? What he lost?" "Maybe," Zora said. "But our happiness doesn't depend on his realizations." That evening, they celebrated Zora's new chapter with a small gathering of close friends at their home. Eleanor raised a toast, to Zora, who built an empire not for power or revenge, but to create a better world for her daughter and countless others. As glasses clinked, Zora looked around at the life she had created, the meaningful work, the loving relationships, the daughter who made every struggle worthwhile. Her journey from that hospital bed 12 years ago had been harder than she could have imagined, but the woman she had become along the way was stronger, wiser, and more fulfilled than she had ever expected to be. Later, as she and Victoria sat on their balcony watching the stars, Victoria said, "You know, most revenge stories end with someone destroyed. But you did something different. You built instead of destroyed." Zora smiled. "The best revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. It's about creating a life so full and rich that their absence becomes irrelevant." Victoria leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I think we did that." "Yes," Zora agreed, putting her arm around her daughter. "We definitely did." 5 years later, the university auditorium was packed as families gathered for the freshman orientation. Zora sat in the third row, trying to contain her mix of pride and emotion as Victoria, now 18, joined her fellow incoming students on stage. The past 5 years had brought many changes. After stepping down as Ascend CEO, Zora had expanded the Jackson Foundation into a global organization supporting women in technology and single-parent families. She had written a best-selling memoir about her journey from abandoned wife to billionaire entrepreneur, with all proceeds going to the foundation. Victoria had grown into a poised, confident young woman with her mother's business acumen and a compassionate heart that was entirely her own. She had been accepted to several prestigious universities but had chosen this one for its innovative social entrepreneurship program. As Zora watched Victoria chatting animatedly with her new classmates, she reflected on how far they had come from those desperate days in the hospital. The pain of Richard's betrayal had long since faded, replaced by gratitude for the life it had ultimately led her to build. After the orientation ceremony, Zora and Victoria walked across the beautiful campus, enjoying the late summer sunshine. "Are you nervous about starting classes?" Zora asked. Victoria shook her head. "Excited more than nervous. I feel ready." They reached the dormitory where Victoria would be staying. As they began unloading suitcases from the car, Zora noticed Victoria freeze, her attention caught by something, or someone, across the quad. Zora followed her gaze and was shocked to see Richard standing awkwardly near a campus map, looking older and somehow diminished in casual clothes rather than his usual power suits. Beside him was his younger son, now 12, clearly also a visitor to the campus. "That's James," Victoria said quietly. "He's here for a summer science program for middle schoolers." Before Zora could respond, Victoria was already walking toward them, her stride purposeful but not angry. Zora followed at a distance, close enough to intervene if needed but giving Victoria space to handle the unexpected encounter her own way. Richard looked up as Victoria approached, surprise and uncertainty crossing his face. The years had not been kind to him. His hair was now fully gray, and his posture suggested health problems. "Victoria," he said, his voice softer than Zora remembered. "I didn't know you'd be here." "It's my orientation day," Victoria replied evenly. "James, it's good to see you." Her half-brother smiled shyly. "You too. Dad's dropping me off for science camp." An awkward silence fell. Richard cleared his throat. "You look well." "Happy." "I am," Victoria confirmed. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "How are you doing?" Richard seemed surprised by the genuine question. "Managing. The doctors say the heart condition is stable as long as I take it easy." He glanced at Zora, who had stayed a few steps back. "Your mother has done an amazing job with you." "Yes, she has," Victoria agreed, no hint of argument in her tone. Then, turning to James, "Do you want to see the robotics lab? It's part of the same building where your camp meets. I got a tour earlier." James looked to his father, who nodded. "Go ahead. I'll find you in a little while." As the siblings walked off together, Richard turned to Zora. "I didn't plan this," he said quickly. "I had no idea she would be here today." "I believe you," Zora said. And surprisingly she did. The manipulative, calculating Richard of old would never have appeared so unprepared, so vulnerable. They stood in uncomfortable silence until Richard spoke again. "I read your book." Zora raised an eyebrow. "All of it?" He nodded. "Twice. It was illuminating to see things from your perspective." He paused. "You were very fair, more than I deserved." "The book wasn't about you," Zora pointed out. "It was about resilience and rebuilding." "I know," Richard acknowledged. "That's what made it harder to read." He looked toward where Victoria and James had disappeared. "She turned out wonderfully. Nothing like me." "She has your intelligence," Zora conceded. "But she uses it to build people up, not tear them down." Richard nodded, accepting the implied criticism without argument. "I have a lot of regrets, Zora. Leaving you that day in the hospital tops the list." Zora studied him, seeing the genuine regret in his eyes. The victory she had once imagined, seeing Richard broken and apologetic, felt hollow now. "We can't change the past, Richard." "No," he agreed. "But I'm trying to do better with whatever time I have left." The heart attack last year was clarifying. Zora felt a surprising twinge of compassion. The man before her was no longer her enemy, just a flawed human being facing his own mortality and regrets. "Victoria kept in touch with the boys," she said, offering an olive branch. "That was her choice and I'm glad she made it." "They adore her," Richard said, a genuine smile briefly lightening his face. "She's been more present in their lives than I have, if I'm honest." Across the quad, Victoria and James emerged from a building, laughing together about something. Seeing them, Richard straightened his posture slightly. "I should go," he said. "Please tell Victoria." He trailed off, seemingly unsure what message could possibly suffice. "Tell her yourself," Zora suggested. "She's an adult now. Your relationship with her is between the two of you." As Richard walked away to meet his children, Zora felt a surprising sense of closure. The anger and hurt that had driven her for so long had transformed over the years into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. Richard's choices had shaped her life, but they no longer defined it. That evening, after helping Victoria settle into her dorm room, Zora prepared to drive back to the hotel where she'd stay before flying home the next day. "Are you okay?" Victoria asked as they hugged goodbye. Seeing him must have been strange. "It was," Zora admitted. "But not in the way I would have expected years ago. He seems diminished." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "When I talk to James and Michael, they tell me he's changed since his heart attack. More present, less focused on business. Too late for us, but maybe not for them." "And how do you feel about that?" Zora asked. Victoria considered the question carefully. "I've made my peace with who he is and who he isn't in my life. Honestly, I feel sorry for him. He missed out on knowing me, and that's his loss." Zora smiled, filled with pride at her daughter's wisdom and compassion. "You're extraordinary, Victoria Wilson Jackson. Don't ever forget that." "I won't," Victoria promised. "I had the best teacher." As Zora drove away from the campus, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the devastated young woman in that hospital bed to the confident, successful person she was now, every struggle, every triumph, every late night working while Victoria slept, every moment of doubt and determination had created this life. Richard's abandonment had once seemed like the end of her world. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more powerful. A life built on her own terms, defined by her own strength and choices. The greatest revenge hadn't been destroying Richard or even surpassing his success. It had been in creating a life so full and meaningful that his presence or absence no longer mattered. In raising a daughter who understood her own worth so completely that she could face her father with compassion rather than anger. As the campus disappeared in her rearview mirror, Zora felt a profound sense of contentment. The circle was complete. The future, both hers and Victoria's, was wide open, full of possibilities that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the women they had become. The best revenge, Zora realized, was simply living well. And by that measure, she had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams.